Morning, Dad.
Hey, going for a run?
Yeah, you should join me like you used to.
Not with my old knees and back.
Try Xanthicin. It could really help. Plus, it's super safe, Dad, and it's good for your heart and brain.
Xanthicin fights aging with astaxanthin, nature's most powerful antioxidant. And with 3 times the absorption and superior purity, it's the brand physicians trust. Find it at getxantho.com and these retailers. Keep doing what you love with Xanthicin.
All right, how's it going, everybody? Episode 30. That's right, we've hit the big 3-0 here on Hawaii Football Now, presented by our good friends over at Xanthicin. Mahalo also to Spectrum Mobile and Hawaii USA FCU. Jordan Helle, Hunter Hughes back with you. We record this Wednesday morning, the 23rd of March at 7:09 a.m. as we hit the record button, or at least our producer Jaron does, on the controls as we get things going. And I don't know if you guys could hear that. It wasn't just the record notice on the Zoom recording, but it's the sound of spring football in the air, Hunter. Footballs are flying, whistles are whistling, coaches are coaching, I guess, right? I mean, there's some yelling going on, but I think that's a positive thing. I don't want to make that to be a negative connotation. There's some thudding, there's some pad on pad contacts, even though they're not necessarily fully dressed at this point. They're not going full speed. We're not taking anybody to the ground, but the sound of football is very much present, as yesterday on Tuesday, the 22nd, the University of Hawaii football team kicked off their 2022 spring ball sessions. As they'll get about 15 of those throughout as we go through April, heading towards the spring game and all of that. Hunter, we'll talk about this at length for sure, but as a guy who went through this a few times, what's the best part about spring ball?
Man, it's a great time, as a football player. But, you were mentioning sounds and feels of spring ball. One other iconic thing with University of Hawaii practices is that train horn that they use to kind of delegate between different periods during practice. And I know firsthand that the students that live in the surrounding buildings of that practice field, they know it's spring ball time too, with that train horn waking them up sometimes early in the morning when practice is underway. So they're aware that practice is going on. Obviously, us as players, we look forward to it. The off season can be kind of a grind, the day in, day out of conditioning, what seems like endless lifting heavy. It's kind of the best time for you building yourself up just as an athlete. But then when you finally get to spring ball and you get to put that helmet on, and for us as QBs, getting to, sling the rock a little bit, throw it around, and just get in the mix, you're reminded, oh yeah, I get to play football. I'm not just a gym rat. I'm not just having to run endlessly so this coach doesn't yell at me. You're reminded why you're there. You get to put a jersey on, and you get to start putting the building blocks together with fall camp, just 5-6 months away now at this point, and you get excited for what is to come.
Yeah, and it's a bit of normalcy, right? I mean, you think back within the last couple of years, spring ball being wiped out in 2020, a little herky-jerky throughout the season and whatnot. And it is, I think it's sort of back to the normal football calendar rhythm, as you point out. The season, you get a couple of months to kind of recoup, but also rebuild, and then a nice little break in the calendar for spring practice, which involves a lot of work, don't get me wrong. And then after spring practice concludes, it's another couple of months, you get into fall camp, and then you get into the season. So there is a bit of a rhythm that comes to it, sort of the circadian nature of football. So that'll sort of wrap up our opening drive there before we get into some of the spring practice happenings, and really more so what spring practice is going to look like for these guys. Again, a big mahalo to Coach Abe Elamimian for joining us last week on episode 29. A lot of fun to catch up with him. He was great, had us excited for the season to come, had us excited for the prospects of some of the guys looking to take their talents to the professional ranks. But any other reactions, Hunter, to our interview with Coach Abe before we dive into spring practice here?
Uh, that my good friend and former teammate Cole McDonald seems to have grown up. They for those of you that didn't listen to it, uh, Coach Abe went and watched and was a part of our pro day, which was held at UNLV just a couple of weeks ago. And one of the former players that made a surprise appearance was Cole McDonald. He came down to throw to receivers like Jared Smart, um, Calvin Turner, and he didn't play with Calvin Turner, yet there was just this seamless sort of chemistry and flow and feel that comes with being Rainbow Warrior football player, regardless of what year you played on. And just hearing that about a dear friend of mine who at the time, whenever I was on the team, was kind of like my younger brother, that of course sticks out for me because I had so much time invested in that guy, and it was a proud older brother moment for me, Jordan, to hear that my boy handled business when it wasn't about him that day. So yeah, that made me really stoked.
No, I love that. I love that. Right. And I think that was one of my big takeaways too, of talking to Coach Elamimian, just establishing this connectivity, right? This connective tissue between generations of Hawaii football players.
Yeah.
And you see that in the composition of this coaching staff. And I think you're seeing that from the coaching staff as that translates to former players, right? A lot of them are part of that connectivity, guys who played on previous iterations of this Rainbow Warrior football program, and bridging that, right? Got some of the OGs, some of the new age guys, some of the ones who aren't that far removed, like a Cole McDonald, getting together with guys they never played with, but really aren't that far separated from, and a guy like Calvin Turner. And then that also bridging down to the guys that took part in spring practice yesterday, right? Or the guys that are going to come in the summer, like the current Rainbow Warriors. And I love that. I think there is such a value to that. And I think it's going to shine through. And I think it's, something that we're going to be keeping our eye on here during spring practice, right? Tying in a lot of these guys, their experiences, their ties to what makes Hawaii football, which in large part is reflective of what makes Hawaii, Hawaii. So that it's going to be fun to see how that all sort of meshes and melds together, and whether or not they can parlay that into, at the end of the day, a winning football team. Right? It's all fun. It's great. It makes sense. You talk about synergy and all these kinds of things, but everybody we've talked to, I think all the coaches on the record of, different platforms when speaking to the media and whatnot, like they're very cognizant and very self-admitting, like, look, at the end of the day, you got to win football games, right? And that's what it's going to come down to. And so really, this is kind of the start of the 2022 campaign, the long road that leads to the opener in August. And so it's going to be curious, I think, for a lot of people, right? You got a new coaching staff. What's the offense going to look like? What's the defense going to look like? Defense, we got a little bit of sense from our first ever guest on the pod, right? Defensive coordinator Jacob Yoro, talking about being multiple, having to match the modern offenses. So I think that's inherent, at least, in modern day college football. Like, you're not running the 46 defense and that's what you run, and be damned, whatever the success rate is.
Yeah.
But on that note, right, the offense for the University of Hawaii, what's that going to look like? And what comments we've seen from Coach Shoemaker, the offensive coordinator, from Timmy Chang, right? You had Stephen Tsai reporting it's like a mixed plate, I think is the term he used. I mean, in articles I've read, in just things that I've seen, right, I don't know if an offense wasn't named. Yeah, I've seen run and gun mixed with pistol, mixed with West Coast, mixed with run and shoot, mixed with run pass option, mixed with air raid, mixed with no huddle and spread. Makes sense of all of that for us, Hunter. Like, what is really being said? It just sounds like a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo, and quite honestly, a lot of offenses that kind of steal and borrow from each other in this day and age anyway.
Yeah, no, honestly, to be completely honest, it is a lot of mumbo jumbo. And they're doing that on purpose to protect themselves as a coaching staff, protect their players, to kind of curb some expectations of what this team is going to look like, because you as a coach can only go as far as the players and the tools that you have at your disposal. So I have no doubt in my mind that someone like Timmy Chang with such a pedigree in the run and shoot has long-term plans of bringing that back to University of Hawaii. However, that is such a unique offense and scheme and mentality that you have to almost indoctrinate your players into. It takes time, not only on a coaching and a teaching level, but also on a recruiting level. You have to recruit the correct pieces to come in and play certain positions in order to make that effective. So, I'll go back. The last previous big coaching shift for us was from the Norm Chow pro style era to the Nick Rolovich run and shoot era. It took Rolo a good 2 years to kind of get established with who he was as a coach, what they wanted to do before they really established the run and shoot as their primary offensive scheme. Although we did incorporate a lot of those run and shoot route concepts and passing transitions, really going from the front side of the field to the back side, and that kind of swaying of a quarterback drop back. If you guys recall that, that's very patented and iconic to the run and shoot style of offenses. We still had guys like Diasime St. Just. We still had Marcus Kemp on the outside. Tui Unga, a fantastic tight end for us during that span, where great players that have to see the field. We need them in order to win football games, but had been conditioned in more of a pro style offense. You have to do yourself a favor as a coach, where you can't just shift the entire identity of the offense completely to something else, and expect everybody to be, one, okay with that, and two, able to accomplish that for you. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I'm not saying that we can't still be successful. It's just going to kind of take some time for them to find their legs, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And you don't want to label it necessarily and pigeonhole yourself and paint yourself into a corner. But you do have to have identity, I think, for sure. And I think we get caught up too many times in trying to label things and put your finger on exactly, hey, we're X type of offense or something like that. When really it's much more than that. And I think it oversimplifies things in a way. So it's going to be fun. And you mentioned this before, Hunter, and so much of it is, personnel. Like what do you have on the roster? How does that fit, right? Does Hawaii have the personnel to line up, two tight ends, a fullback, and run it down everybody's throat? Right? But probably not, right? Like that just hasn't been the makeup of the squad over the years. Not that they can't run effectively, but it may look a little different. And so, when you look at the spring roster, right, which is available on the Hawaii Athletics website, and you can kind of parse through and see what's what and who's going to be available and seeing guys out there on the field now and in actual practice settings and not just the off-season workouts. I figure probably good to go through some of these position groups, right, and see what the potential is at this point. Of course, this doesn't necessarily include some of the guys who are going to enroll during the summer, some of the guys that are still on their way here that aren't either already enrolled or haven't already been part of the program, right, for some of these newcomers. So this isn't the full roster, obviously. I think a lot of the folks listening are very aware of that, but good to remind everybody. And we're biased, so we'll start on the offensive side of the football. And of course, so much is going to hinge on the quarterback, right? I don't care what offense you're running. It could be the triple option. Like you need somebody who is confident and comfortable in whatever system you're looking to run. And obviously the guy who brings back the most experience is Braden Shager, who started, a number of games last season when Chevin Cordero was hurt. Cordero transfers, and so Shager becomes, the de facto guy in a sense. I don't think it is by any means his job just yet. There's a healthy amount of competition. You got the Washington State transfer in Cam Cooper, who maybe will grab the most headlines other than Braden Shager, but you got some experience coming back, guys like Armani Eden, guys like Jake Farrell, who have been within the program. Connor Upwell is another one, right, who was on the roster last year. He was St. Louis school product at quarterback, sort of after Jaden DeLaura, just before AJ Bianco, and was sort of lost out in his 1 year to start because of the COVID situation. So he's in there. You got a couple of other familiar names. I believe there's 7 total quarterbacks on the spring roster, which is a decent amount because you're going to be throwing a lot of balls, right, during spring, whether it's for your own purposes, for another position group's purposes. Like there are going to be a lot of balls in the air. And so more arms, the better. The June Jones philosophy, right? He would carry
Yeah.
like double-digit quarterbacks because of the amount of guys or the amount of times that they'll be throwing the football. But you got Ephraim Tuliloa, former Punahou standout who played junior college football at New Mexico Military Institute, is one guy. And then there's Chad Owens Jr., a walk-on from Honolulu High School, even though he played basically the bulk of his career on the mainland.
In
You know,
Canada.
when in Canada, to be specific, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, when his dad was up there having one heck of a career, and is, you know, sort of become the face of the revamped walk-on program. Never really got a chance to play at Moanalua because of the canceled COVID season. Not the biggest dude, kind of like his dad, but boy, it looks like he could play some football. Had some nice moments yesterday. So it's an interesting mix at that position group. You got some mix of experience, some youthful exuberance, maybe, and guys like Owens Jr. And so for spring, in particular, for quarterbacks, Hunter, as we look at this, you know, how do guys approach this, right? When there's no clear-cut number one starter, at least from our vantage point, right? It doesn't seem like that, nor has anybody been named or anointed. You know, how do they approach this thing? What's key for you as you sort of keep your eye on this group in particular?
Well, first of all, with having 7, I think that position group is pretty much rounded out come even for fall camp. The most we ever had, you know, under the Rolo era, his first fall, we had 8 on the roster, which, to be honest, is too much. I got love for all those guys, but 8 was a bit steep, and 7 is probably a good number that you want going into fall camp, because just so everyone at home knows, you have maybe 2, potentially 3 over on the offensive side of the football, the guys getting reps that are trying to make a dent to play on the actual field for us, and then the rest of the guys are over on scout team on a day-to-day practice standpoint. So you kind of need that kind of number to run a Division I football practice. And you know, with some of these guys, and with where just the nature of the team is at right now, it's an open race, Jordan. I'm jealous that I don't still have any years of eligibility, because I feel like I still got a shot to get out there. It's just a fun, energizing kind of a feeling as a quarterback right now, where brand new coach, new relationships, new environment. Some of the BS that we went through in the last few months is gone. Like, it's a clean slate. You feel that way as a player too. Everything in the past is gone. The old is gone. The new has come. I'm about to start preaching up in here, Jordan. It's just it's a fun time to be a football player, specifically a quarterback right now. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of versatility, and I know it's going to be a very competitive environment too in that QB room. Of how can I stand out from a schematic standpoint? Can I impress the coach with understanding of this offense, what they're trying to implement in the film room? All of that stuff goes a long way with a new coach looking, who's my guy that I can trust, who's one of the leaders that I can look to, because all these coaches are looking for is someone that's dependable, going to hang on to the football, and a leader that they can hang their hat on. And so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
You played for a head coach who was a quarterback. Is that what you also played for coaches, right, who weren't quarterbacks?
Uh-huh.
Does what's the dynamic? Is it different because your head guy played the position, sees it sort of through your guy's eyes, or you know, does it not matter because he's, you know, a little more removed and really truly, you know, overseeing everything?
Yeah, when Rolo first started, he would jump in and take reps with us. Um, so, you know, to go from the Norm Chow kind of militant, you know, very strict sort of ran program, to Rolo's in there with a bucket hat saying, "Get out of there, it's my turn." Totally different style. And then two, where, in something like the run and shoot, there's so much understanding, there's so much knowledge that can be poured from a guy like Rolo into a young quarterback like Drew Brown, Cole McDonald, Kaika Woosley, that you need that hands-on experience to be able to kind of learn it, because it's just so different, Jordan. Having that expertise on the field right behind you is everything. And um, someone that's a little bit more youthful and can speak the language of the current college football player and meet them where they're at, I think is helps steward more camaraderie and a heightened um, competitive environment, specifically with quarterbacks. In our experience with Rolo, because he was talking trash with us. He could critique the minute things where, other people would be like, "Oh, that was a bad ball." He would be like, "You." If you don't throw this back shoulder to this guy, you're going to get him killed. Little things like that, of getting that firsthand expertise from someone who not only did do it, but still can do it, because he gets in and throws still a phenomenal ball at however many years he is now, early 40s. He's still got it. It carries a little bit more weight on the field whenever he's behind you.
Yeah, I was curious about sort of those dynamics, right? And how guys, because, well, Hawaii's got another former quarterback as their head
Yeah.
coach, and so, what role does he have there? And obviously early on, sort of reported that he'd spent a lot of time, this Timmy Chang, that is, with the wide receivers, although they have filled out that position coaching job in Jared Ursua. We'll get into that in the second half. So it's always, kind of interesting to see how a head coach sort of spends his time, right? And how he delegates in certain areas, but also maybe has his hands a little more involved in other areas. I don't think there's any necessarily one right way to do it or anything like that. And different head coaches, learn and sort of figure out what works best. And I think that changes depending on who your
Because
staff
Graham
is
was
as
more on
well.
the defensive side.
Yeah.
Graham spent the majority of his time on the other side of the field. You're right. I didn't mean to cut you off. It
No.
really does flow, depending on expertise, comfortability, and just where that coach has the most strength. He will be on that side of the field more often than not.
Yeah, it's going to be um, fun, I think, to see that development for Coach Chang and the learning curve, right, that comes with it. It's a steep one for sure for a guy, at his first head coaching job. But he's got a fun group of quarterbacks, a diverse group of quarterbacks to oversee as well with this group. Ian Shoemaker, the offensive coordinator. All right, taking a look at the wide receivers before we sort of head into our halftime break here. The pass catchers, right? You lose a lot for sure. We know that, right? Whether it's Calvin Turner, Nick Martiner, that's no secret. And so they obviously have to turn the page. There's some excitement coming back, right? You've got guys like Zion Bowens, who's got some experience, Jonah Ponoke, who got a fair amount of experience. Some of the younger guys who saw spot duty last season and even the COVID year, Koali Nishigaya, who I'm very high on, and I think might have a nice fit perhaps in a Timmy Chang type of team. If you're thinking, little shifty slot backs that can find their way on the field. I think anytime Koali went in, he was productive. And I would have liked to see him more last year. You got guys like Tamatoa Mokiao, Ati Malala as well, who saw a little bit of spot duty. Stephen Fiso is kind of fascinating to me. He sort of played all over both sides of the ball. We saw him as sort of that hybrid tight end, wide receiver. I think he's officially listed as a tight end on the spring roster. A bigger body type receiver, but not your traditional inline tight end. And sort of had that breakout game against Wyoming at the end of the season, where it's like, oh, okay, this guy's exciting. We got a little versatile weapon that you can kind of deploy at multiple points and multiple formations. He's a guy that I would keep my eye on as well. You've got a couple of the younger guy, redshirt freshman Jalen Walthall. I know Stephen Sy mentioned him in his write-up. A burner, like a speedster, So we'll see. There's a couple of other guys as well. I know Carson Pupuno had a decent first practice yesterday, kind of hooking up with Chad Owens Jr. He's a sophomore from Kamehameha Maui, another local kid from Lahaina, on the Valley Isle. So, it's not as deep a unit, maybe, at least just in terms of experience, as obviously Hawaii has had the last couple of years. But it's a unit that should get a lot of reps and should get a lot of work for an offense that, again, we're not necessarily calling it anything, but I think it will put the ball in the air a fair amount.
Oh, absolutely. And, one person that, isn't necessarily listed with wide receivers, but I would like to mention is Dior Scott. That last chance you stand out from just a couple of years ago. He's kind of just been hanging out with the team, been on the roster now for a couple of years. I believe he even earned a scholarship under the Graham era. And as if people are familiar with the Last Chance U show, he's got phenomenal outside speed with great hands and just is a tough, sort of a slot looking guy where, yeah, he might be listed as a running back, but that should really be listed as a flex. And I like that he is here and available now, because I think they're going to try to use him a lot more this year, in kind of a more extensive capacity, because other teams haven't seen him. And that's another thing I want to touch on, Jordan, is that though we lost a lot of guys, there is some benefit there in terms of other teams being able to scout us, both with new coaches, new scheme, new players. You have an advantage coming into teams in our conference, for example, that are used to kind of seeing this and that from University of Hawaii. All of that is yet to be written. So you can, in a sense, catch teams by surprise with guys like Diori Scott and others who can make an impact on the field right away.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that is a good shout by you on, excuse me, Dior Scott. And we can touch on a few more of the running backs on the other side when we get into the second half. We'll round out the offense. We'll probably save the defense for next week because we don't want to sell those guys short. And spring ball obviously will be going for, a month and a half or so here and a lot to get to. But we'll take a quick halftime. We'll get into the second half here. But before we head out for our mid-show break, you got to make sure you check out our good friends over at Xanthus. And you may have heard about this amazing supplement called Astaxanthin. Doctors and pharmacists recommend it for everything from joint and muscle function to cholesterol health and cognitive function, even anti-aging. But did you know only one brand delivers 3 times more astaxanthin to your body, making it a better buy than the competition? Introducing Xanthicin, available at getxantho.com, Newtown Square Pharmacy, Down to Earth Kaka'ako, GNC stores, and PharmaCare Hawaii. Learn more at getxantho.com. That's GetZantho.com. Second half coming up.
This is Hawaii Football Now from ESPN Honolulu.
All right, second half time here on Hawaii Football Now, episode 30. It's amazing we've made it this far and still going. Jordan Helle, Hunter Hughes back with you, breaking down some of the names that we're keeping our eye on for spring ball that are listed on the official roster here as things got started yesterday, Tuesday, March 22nd. We record this Wednesday morning on the 23rd as we're set to release this tomorrow on Thursday, March 24th, which will also be the second day of spring practice. The first fully open to the public spring practice will be on Saturday. Mid-morning down there on lower campus. So we were talking about the running backs in part with Dior Scott, who could be this sort of, slash versatile type guy that they could use in multiple different positions. I don't know if we want to compare him to Calvin Turner, but maybe a role like a Calvin Turner has been deployed at different points, under the previous regime. Just a guy who can play in multiple different spots that they can get the football to in different ways. Obviously, Dedrick Parsons leads the running back depth chart. The guy was terrific last year. I think obviously, with the loss of Day Hunter, that was the big headline, but he did miss some time last year. And Parson came in and was solid, man. He maybe wasn't quite as shifty. Maybe the straight line speed wasn't Day, but man, he was productive. And this guy was tough, especially in short yardage situations, was a workhorse, and a guy that I would imagine is going to look to even expand that role again this year.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of developed into our third down back in a sense, like got in there and hit someone. It was just it was exciting to see, and that can kind of spur on a little bit of juice on the sideline too with that kind of play style. Is not afraid to get in there and get your face mask dented up a little bit. Diedrich was kind of that for us this last year, and it'll be interesting to see what a more active role will look like for him, where he's not coming in for relief and maybe catching people slightly off guard. So I'm interested to see what kind of role he's going to have, and in addition, what kind of running game we're going to try to establish too, because a lot goes into that with what sort of pieces you have on the offensive line. Who can you get to that second level, linebackers, and then ultimately trying to get someone up to the safeties to get them blocked up to try to spring a big one. So a lot of that goes in for the running game.
Yeah, and I think Parsons is the guy. And so my curiosity sort of goes to, who else is going to emerge, like who can fit with him in the backfield, maybe behind him, or however you want to see the backfield playing out. But I mean, you're going to need more than just one feature back. That's just the way the game is played now. Maybe some of that is Dior Scott, some of those snaps. Maybe it's somebody else. You got the two young guys from Texas, right? You got Jordan Johnson, who's a redshirt freshman out of Allen High School, big time in Dallas, Texas. You got Tylen Hines, who was a Graham signee, right, or a Graham recruit, who comes in sort of a smaller scat back, but really productive in high school. I don't know what his plans are, what the program's plans are for him in terms of, progressing through and the possibility of red shirts or anything like that. But it'll be interesting. And just some of the names, right? There's 10 running backs on the roster for spring practice. So just trying to see, I'm curious to see who emerges sort of out of that amongst a group that really outside of Parsons and to a degree Scott is, kind of unknown, and a lot of opportunities perhaps for these guys to emerge and sort of claim.
Yeah, and I could see the running back position, them even making a move for one or two more guys with transfer portal and stuff like that. It's one of those positions where you can kind of come in and claim a spot in an offense without having a lot of understanding, because it's decently simple compared to other position groups like wide receiver, um, DB, safety, linebacker, quarterback. Obviously, that there's a much higher what should I say, learning curve in trying to get established with the scheme that a team is trying to establish, where a running back in some aspects, tell them where to run, tell them where to block, that there is some education as well. But if you got talent, you can pretty much be a running back wherever you go. And my hot take is that they're going to try to bring at least one more guy through the transfer portal before fall camp in that specific position group.
And so with the running backs, we sort of transition into tight ends. This is a group that, some people look at it as, almost a dirty word when you think to some of the run and shoot purists. I think it's like, well, how come we're recruiting so many tight ends? Why do we got so? And I would to those people, I always sort of just say, pump the brakes a little bit, right? These guys can play multiple roles. It's not a bad thing to incorporate, whether it's on your offense, whether it's getting these guys involved in special teams. Hey man, some of these guys can be mismatched nightmares, right? I mean, you look at the Travis Kelce types, or the Darren Wallers and the George Kittles, right? And Pitts and everything in between, where some of these guys are just really maulers, blocking as well as, prolific pass catchers. And then you got the Waller Pitts types, where it's like, I mean, these guys are basically slot receivers. And Waller like lines up at wide out, like all these things, right? It's like tight end in name, but in modern practice, it's a little different. And so, you've got a group that isn't necessarily going to be a large number, but on the roster, you got guys like Caleb Phillips, who is back, the Stanford transfer who was here last year, who saw quite a bit of playing time. who's got some experience. Again, Stephen Fiso is technically listed as a tight end on the roster. You got Grayson Morgan coming in, the junior college transfer for this group. And I believe Jordan Murray, Missouri State transfer. I forgot to confirm whether he's here already or not. But you got some guys coming in, and Murray in particular had a lot of experience over at Missouri State. So, it's kind of this group that maybe gets lost a little bit, particularly just, with the history of Hawaii football and what it's been offensively. But, if they could turn that into something and make that group, as we saw, I think later in the year, in 2021, whether it was, sort of transitioning guys to FISO into these hybrid positions or something like that. It took a little while for some of those dudes to find their home. I think a guy like Solo Turner, who was sort of listed in that hybrid position, but eventually actually, I think, was deployed more effectively on the defensive side of the football by the end of the year. I'm curious to see how the tight end is incorporated and what it looks like in this offense.
Yeah, and just because we have tight ends doesn't mean we're fully going back to a pro style offense. Having a tight end on the outside to body somebody and throw him a back shoulder is a luxury for a quarterback. I mean, I wish I could describe it better. It's like a breakaway with a right-handed layup for white guys like me who can't dunk it. It's literally one of the easiest things in the world. Throw it up there, let your tight end throw a shoulder into a smaller defensive back, and let him catch the ball. It is so easy, you guys. So I'm curious too, having a big body, both to bring down and help on the blocking side of things, but also in the passing game. It just adds versatility and layers of complexity to your offense.
I agree, and those hybrid guys, right, can be so valuable. You can deploy them in a number of ways, and that's sort of where the position has come when you're coaching tight ends, H backs, like some programs just call them hybrids, like they don't even throw the tight end tag on them or anything like that. It'd be interesting to see how this unit works as well in tandem with the offensive line, because that's going to be, any program that's make or break, right? It's an offensive line that brings back experience, but you lose your center in Cole Val, who's a massive loss, not just in terms of, the dude was a monster at center, just a monster of a human being and a good center as well. And then you lose right tackle Gene Pryor, right? But you bring back some strength, right? Il Manning is back at left tackle. Micah Vanterpool, who started a number of games at guard, he's kind of versatile. Maybe we could see him move to the outside. On the interior, Solo Vaipulu's got a ton of experience. Iliki Tanuvasa has played guard spots. He has played center. He could be in the running there to take over for Leval. I thought he played really well when healthy last year, did Tanuvasa. You got Mo Ta'ala, right, of the big Ta'ala brothers down in there. He's exciting, I think, in the middle. I'd be curious to watch who else emerges from that pack, right? Who can get into the rotation, who can compete for playing time. Sergio Muasau is a guy that was pretty highly regarded coming out of Mililani High School a couple of years ago. Can he get into a spot? Can he get his body right to help out here? Because I think he's got the tools for it. And some of these other names as well, some local kids that may get a chance to fight for spots here. But it's an offensive line that loses 40% basically, and which is a fair amount, but they do have some coming back and other guys that may be in position to step up here.
Yeah, and what's funny is one guy in particular, because he's my friend, he's sticking out, is Micah Vanderpool, who literally was my teammate all the way back in 2017. So let's just go through that, okay? 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and this is the 2022 season. COVID has allowed for players like Micah to come into his sixth year. My guy is working on a PhD at this level. Sorry, no, he's not. But it's just it allows for guys to extend their college careers well beyond whatever was potentially possible. And guys like him, Il Manning, having just a couple what's the word, older mentor style pieces on that offensive line is huge in helping young guys come in there and try to get established. You get that mentorship, that understanding, and that calmness in the huddle on the field, especially in big time games like when we play Michigan at Ann Arbor early in the year. So they're going to be huge in establishing our offensive line unit.
Yeah, I mean, this team's going to have dudes that are like barely 18 and also,
Exactly.
the Micah Vanterpools who are, pushing what 23, 24. Like it's you're going to have some
25.
veterans on this team to bring the young whippersnappers into shape. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And the offensive line is one of those units where you need that kind of older kind of toughness, because man, it's an ugly style of football there. It's a completely different game than what us as quarterbacks go through, Jordan. I mean, getting smacked in the face, people stomping on your toes, oftentimes a running back, coming in and taking your knee out. I mean, I feel for my big boys, man. They play a completely different game than the rest of us.
Yeah.
And it takes some perseverance, some toughness, and just some wisdom and some seasons to kind of get yourself acquainted to playing Division I football at the offensive line. It's a tough deal, and not everyone's ready to go at 18 years old. So having those older guys there really goes a long way.
Yeah, it takes a special breed of dude, man, to go play offensive line. I echo those sentiments for sure. All right, we'll save the defense for next week, especially with all the turnover on that side of the football, right? I think it's even more so than the offense, where we're talking new guys, man, new names, which brings with it some excitement, no doubt. Did want to also mention the coaching staff has basically been rounded out, right? We basically have a full coaching staff. Jared Ursua is the hire at receiver coach. That was the last, basically on-field position assistant coach that had yet to been filled. Familiar name, obviously, a guy who grew up in Kailua Kona, older brother of John Ursua, one of the greats in University of Hawaii history as a pass catcher, currently on the Seahawks roster still. Jared played at Kealakekee High School, on the west side of the Big Island. He's right around my age. He played at Southern Utah from 2008 to 2011. Helped them win a pair of Big Sky titles as a assistant coach. 2015 and 2017 made the move over to Weber State, where he was the wide receivers coach the last 3 years for the Wildcats, where they had a ton of success. Like, Weber's always been a very solid program year in and year out, but they made the national semifinals in 2019. They won 2 Big Sky titles in 3 years, and that conference, man, is always just so good, and really, really tough. And so he's coached them up. They've put up a bunch of points. Their receivers have been highly productive. The last time the University of Hawaii hired a former Weber State receivers coach, it worked out fairly well. Craig Stutzman, not that long ago,
Yeah.
right? At least for the time that he was here, man, they were productive, right? I don't think there's any denying that. They're going to look for him to recruit the West Coast and Utah in particular, right? With that family's ties and particularly his coaching stops in that state over the course of his young coaching career. And then Derek Fa'avi, familiar name that, former University of Hawaii player as well. He's the director of player development. He has sort of been working in the private sector, private coaching sector, working for, a company, Raising Champions LLC, private quarterback training company. Previously coached at Adams State for 4 years. Was the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at Adams State. He's coached in Japan. We know him, right, from his time at the University of Hawaii, early 2000s. Coached at Campbell as well, Campbell High School. So he's had a ton of stops. He's obviously got a ton of ties to Hawaii and ties all over the place. And a guy who's had on-field coaching experience as well, I think, which is very valuable, because even though he technically isn't, an on-field coach as the director of player development, having that sort of experience, that sort of understanding only helps, right, when you get the coaching staff together. So yeah, it's about complete, man. This is basically the staff that is going to be moving forward. And And I think, a lot of folks were wondering about the receiver coach's position because that took the longest to fill. But I think in Jared Ursua, they've got a good one. They've got a good guy, and the model so far has been, I think, partly out of necessity, but also because of the profile of guy, it's been the 1AA coach, right? Whether it's Coach Shoemaker, whether, that we've hired a couple of guys from Eastern Washington, now Weber. Some of these guys making the jump up are getting their opportunity to coach at the FBS level for the first time, and it's coming through the University of Hawaii, which I don't think is a bad way to go, right? That's where Hawaii's got to be. You got to find the young up and comers before everybody else does, not just in recruiting, but also in hiring your coaches.
Yeah, totally. And for our faithful fan base listening, it takes a long time to get coaches in here, get them interviewed, go through the sort of procedures that it takes to hire a coach, where, just because we didn't have a wide receiver coach earlier in this process didn't mean that they weren't planning on bringing one in. There's so much that goes into off-season coaching for these guys, both in recruiting, figuring out what sort of offense, what sort of team they're going to try to establish. I feel for a guy like Coach Timmy, where there's so many balls up in the air that you have to kind of manage. And I'm glad they got it done with maybe a day or two to spare before spring camp. But it goes to show a lot goes into this. And we just got to trust the process as those watching from afar. And I think it was a slam dunk with someone like Jared. You've got that strong Hawaii tie, just an added little peppering of Ohana to our coaching staff that already oozed of it. So I couldn't be more stoked as well, Jordan.
Yeah, it's a fun group, I think, and one that hopefully people can get behind, and obviously a lot of that will come with their outreach to the community, and then at the end of the day, winning some football games. So again, we'll get into the defense next week. There is a lot to cover when it comes to spring practice. It is fun. It's fun for everybody involved. I think the fans will get an opportunity on Saturday to go check it out. For us, discussing and covering this team, and most importantly for the players and staff, man, they get to get after it. And that's what football is all about, and getting opportunities on the field in a portion of the schedule where, hey man, the pressure's off. Go out and compete. Guys are competing for jobs. There's some pressure there, no doubt about it. But this is really a time to go out and work. So it'll be pretty fun. All right, wrapping things up, little overtime segment here. Hunter, do you usually fill out brackets? How's your bracket doing?
Oh my goodness, man. St. Peter's, is it? The 15 seed?
St. Peter's, Kentucky? That's right.
Oh,
St.
man,
Peter's, the Peacocks,
guys.
Sweet 16.
Oh, I love and hate those guys. Absolutely destroyed me. At this point, Jordan, I'm really just holding on to a Duke, North Carolina Final Four. Cinderella story for Coach K's last year. I think that would just be fantastic. But outside of that, my bracket might as well be torched. It's over. How about you?
I got Duke winning it all, so that's still alive. But the region, whichever region it is that Baylor was in, that lost, I don't have anybody in the Sweet 16, so that's
North Carolina beat them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Carolina's region, I don't think I have any of the four teams remaining correct. It's all wrong. So that's where I'm at in my bracket, and it's a good thing this isn't a college basketball podcast, I suppose, and nobody's taking advice from us. So yeah, and shout out to the Rainbow Wahine again. Played Baylor pretty tough for 2.5 quarters against one of the top 10 teams in the country, and then the Bears, who clearly were tired out by Laura Beeman's squad, turned around and lost to South Dakota in the second round, and what was one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. So it's always fun. March is great. You got March Madness, and you got spring football, man. It's a nice time of year, that's for sure. So that'll do it for us. We will wrap things up, as we will see you next week on episode 31. Hope to get some folks down there on Saturday for spring practice as well. And hope spring's eternal this time of year. So we're optimistic, as you are as well, we hope. Again, big mahalo to our sponsors, Xanthison, as well as Spectrum Mobile and Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union. Jordan Hunter saying aloha. We'll see you next week, everybody, here on Hawaii Football Now.
You've been listening to Hawaii Football Now with Jordan Helle and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.